It was Seneca who said, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. And we've come to the end of the Corporate Explorer Fieldbook series. And I want to thank all the authors who came onto the show throughout 2024. And I want to thank the sponsors, our benefactors in 2024 for that series, Wazoku, who are pioneers of total innovation, transforming how organizations solve challenges, drive growth, and deliver measurable results. As the world's only networked innovation marketplace, Wazoku connects people, ideas, and technology to create scalable, impactful innovation. You can find Wazoku at www.wazoku.com, and you can meet the team from Wazoku, including the CEO, Simon Hill, who will be speaking at and attending the Reinvention Summit here in Ireland, April 29th and 30th. 2025, and you can find out more about that at the reinventionsummit.com. Let's get stuck into this bittersweet moment, this Seneca moment, and let's get started with the episode, the finale, with Andy Binns and Eugene Ivanov. We welcome back to the show Andy Binns, and we welcome to the show for the first time Eugene Ivanov. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for your Aidan.
Hey, Aidan. Great to have you back, Andy. Great to meet you, Eugene. I thought we'd start as a way of bringing it full circle with the preface of the book, because we did cover this at the very, very start, Andy. The genesis of the book came from a moment of seeing these brilliant people who were practicing theories without sometimes knowing what theories they were practicing. And you thought, actually, we need to capture that because we've captured the theory before in the Corporate Explorer book. We've captured that in Mike Tushman and Charles O'Reilly's work before you wrote that book, The Corporate Explorer. But this was different. This was something about bringing that scar tissue to life through words. So maybe we'll start with that.
That's very well said, scar tissue. The job of building new businesses from inside established corporations is not easy. And I'd started recently with a large firm discussion about working with them. And I started out as, I'm not going to bring some magic recipe. There is no single simple way of getting this done. It's hard work. And the genesis of Corporate Explorer, but I think more Corporate Explorer Fieldbook, because we had so many conversations about the first set of ideas in the book, is this insight that it's already happening. You know, my revered and beloved colleagues, Michael and Charles, didn't invent the ambidextrous organization. It's been happening for as long as there have been corporations which have sought to grow and to develop. All we've done is start to harness an understanding of what they do, what works, what doesn't. And that's what's going on here. So necessarily, the theorists, the writers, those who are studying the practice are always chasing the practitioners. We're always behind and hoping to bring as much of their work to success as possible.
With all due respect to the work that Mike, Charles, and Andy done before, this was already kind of, we were in a trade. So we just wanted to give another impetus to it. And we start this book with this line, the real work for authors starts when the book is published. And that's what happened to Andy when they published Brian book. So he got engaged in conversation with people. People wanted actually to talk about this book. We all read a lot of wonderful books. You close this book, put on the shelf and forget it. But this book was different. And people wanted to continue this conversation. And that's what happened. And again, as your show shows, that it's what is happening with this book. And that justifies what Andy and I believe, that this book is not a collection of answers, is a library of questions.
Andy asked me before we came on air what were my observations from doing the show. There's a couple of shows I did, and I really feel myself very privileged where, for example, doing all the work of Clayton Christensen, studying that chronologically, doing the same with Tushman O'Reilly, which led me to Andy, to the Corporate Explorer book, which led me to the Corporate Explorer Fieldbook. To be able to go through that in a systematic way chronologically is really, really interesting. But I see the evolution as well of it's so much different talking about this information from the outside versus actually doing the work and the difficulty in doing that work and going, yeah, I know the theories, I've read the articles, I've read the books, but actually when I get to it, there's so much challenge. And what I loved about the book was the feedback I got from so many listeners to the show over the years. And they're like going, you know what? I love your show, but I really love this because it tells me that I'm not the broken one, that the resistance I'm experiencing, everybody experiences it, even the best companies in the world. And now I have a language to be able to articulate that.
Yeah, this is right, because there's sort of scripts we have about any system we're a part of, where it's like, we always do that at this company, right? Or I speak with many of your Irish compatriots about the Ireland rugby team, and there are certain traits about how the Irish talk about their rugby team. And the reality is what's going on in their rugby team is the same as the English and the French and the South Africans. But somehow we give it this sort of particularly highly critical, stance. But what's the same is more consistent, right? And sometimes we lose sight of that because we're so in our own company. But actually, most of the challenges that the Corporate Explorer faces are generic and can be solved with some thoughts. But as I say that, I want to make sure that it sounds like it's a single recipe, because it has to be adapted for a context necessarily. The episode that really stood out for me that you did was Eris Cruschitz at Unica. There's brilliant exposition from my friend Eris about what it takes to actually build an ambidextrous unit, the sort of practical issues that are involved. And in some of them, Eris and I disagree. I'll talk to him tomorrow. We work side by side on many of these things, and he makes a judgment about how to do this in the context of building a business in health, building a business from an Austrian insurance company. It's all context. There's a lot of judgment that goes into this to make it work.
That's another element, is the unique configuration of your business, the timing of your business, maybe your country that you're operating in. All these things have a dramatic effect. The thing I loved about the Eric episode was that sometimes the people who start the business are not the people you need later on as you go to scale it. And that even happens to a new unit inside the company. And there's difficult questions to be had there. But when you have some type of mental model, which the book gives you, to be able to foresee these things, you can prepare for them. And that's what I loved about that episode with Eric, that he was saying, look, there was stuff here we didn't see coming down the line, but now I have the way to actually communicate that, so it saves you having to go through that hassle.
I just cannot resist reminding you of this line by Leo Tolstoy that, all happy family look alike and all unhappy family look in different ways. I think that, business world is perhaps different, because I don't know about successful families, successful businesses, but businesses that have troubles with corporate innovation, with corporate exploration, actually have all the same problems. They, in a sense, look alike, and our book basically highlights these problems, list them, and try to give some advice of how to overcome.
I'm going to build on your Tolstoy quote, because there's another quote by Tolstoy, which is a nice segue, which is, everybody thinks of changing the world, but nobody thinks of changing him or herself. And this idea of personal renewal. And the reason I bring that up is the world of consulting, or even the world of business in any sense. If you're a corporate explorer unit, you can't really think about it now without thinking about the massive transformative effect of AI. And you mentioned AI in passing in the book, but since you published the book, it's become a major transformation force that has been thrust upon everybody. Not everybody's really ready for that. I thought we'd mention that because I'm sure if we were rewriting it today, you'd probably include a little bit more on AI because we have to.
Yeah. Eugene, you've thought a lot about this in many ways.
I noticed that in November, there was 2 years as this famous chapter GPT-3 was published. And I remember that back then, 2022, November, Aidan and I were actually very busy preparing our manuscript. So I'm sure that neither of us pay too much attention to this topic. Well, here we are 2 years from that. The book mentioned that you should read it twice in past. I like to say that now artificial intelligence is not even the elephant in the room. I would say it's a dinosaur. And you both believe that artificial intelligence is a very general transformative technology, is still a little bit looking for its purpose, a little bit for applications. However, I would argue that corporate explorers could actually disproportionately benefit from it. And I explain, because of cost factor. There is many things that there are debates. What artificial intelligence can do, what cannot do, what can it do better. What we know that we can do decently, it does for only a fraction of a price. And corporate explorers with limited resources, with small teams, and often starting actually by themselves all alone, they can benefit from this cost factor because there are many applications that can do basically sitting in front of their computers without being engaged in time and money sucking exercises. And again, at least for this period of time, I see that corporate explorers will disproportionately benefit from this technology.
Yeah. One of the things that I also picked up was our friends Wazoku sponsored the series. I know you work with them very closely. And one of the things they do is engage the open innovation community. They bring the Wazoku crowd comes in. And again, thinking about the efficiency that AI brings, one of the things that we noted was once you have your Corporate Explorer unit set up or your section of the business set up, once you have that mindset instilled in the business, there is another way to actually accelerate things, and that's engaging in open innovation. I thought we'd say a bit more on that. You do touch on it in the book, but you also do a lot of this work in combination with Wazoku and in yourselves with Change Logic.
As someone who monitors open innovation closely, I can see that the bridges between open innovation and corporate exploration are actually very strong. It was curious that I read an article about different models of open innovation, and they actually mentioned original Charles and Michael papers, because they now see that implementing different models of open innovation, outside out, outside in, and so on, may require ambidextrous organization because of incompatibility of models. So business academic literature already benefits from this corporate exploration approaches. The reverse, what I see immediately, it's one of my favorite chapters in the book written by Christine Gresham from Change Logic and John Greco from Manual Device about ecosystems. And actually, handling ecosystems is difficult. We all know that. It perhaps even more difficult for corporate explorers without kind of experience in this area. And open innovation provides a lot of very useful text material, how to handle, how to implement knowledge flow from the systems. So there is a healthy exchange that is emerging from different pieces of research, which we always have to welcome.
I learned from Eugene on open innovation more than I know myself. And as you say, from Wazoku, who I think are the leaders in this space. And AI potentially totally disrupts open innovation and takes it to a wholly new level because the capacity for it to intersect different threads of ideas and knowledge and experience and to identify patterns, this is exactly where it is strongest. And so that ideation piece of innovation is potentially, I think, the area of deepest revolution, right? And so I think if we go forward 5 years, we're just going to be doing this in a very different way, fundamentally different. I think incubation also, we're going to be doing it in a fundamentally different way because we can spin up prototypes and test them so much faster. I mean, the whole area of agentic workflows, right, which is a great phrase to say, AI agentic workflows. I sort of tried to learn what it means, which had been just sort of putting together different AI agents to create an automation of a set of customer experiences. And this is then something that you can now do, if you understand this well enough, fairly fast and test it out with potential customers in a way that previously would be a year of work or obviously coding apps through voice commands. which today you can do, but the outcome isn't that great. In a year's time, it'll be awesome, right? So that is really substantial. And I think this is going to be the power for corporate explorers, because so many of this on the ideation and on this incubation piece, you're going to be looking for ways to apply these insights faster than everybody else. These advantages are there for a corporation. They're also in the world. And as Eugene says, the cost is so much lower. So the startup threat, the Red Book, how corporations beat startups, right? This is premised on the notion you can beat them. Well, maybe in the world of AI, you can't anymore. And so my appeal to corporations is you've got to up your game on letting corporate explorers free, because the capacity of an engaged individual motivated to find business opportunities is so much more powerful than your top-down strategies. And so you need to be able to release that energy and use these tools to discover cases where where value creation can happen. And so there's this sort of, I think, potential speed, energy coming into corporate innovation in the next 5 years. And it's going to be something that I don't think we can predict. Certainly, Corporate Explorer Fieldbook, second edition, or maybe it's a whole new book for the age of AI, is going to be full of how you use these technologies in ideation and in incubation, and then maybe also in scale to bring them to life.
You hinted at this, Andy, maybe for the Corporate Explorer Fieldbook Part 2 is the importance of leadership. So you asked me before coming on air, what was one of the big lessons I had? One of the things that was certainly reinforced is ideation is where most innovation shows or any kind of show in transformation will talk about, because it's the easy, fluffy stuff. Anything's possible when it comes to ideation. Incubation is kind of going, great, we got that. There's a lot of biases that go with that. Perhaps I fall in love with my idea. Perhaps it's the boss's idea that the boss likes, so we back that one to get me some extra runway. But when the rubber hits the road is scaling. And scaling needs leadership and really needs such oversight with that. There's so many biases and resistance to change that happen and only reveal themselves when you're at scale level. And I thought we'd maybe leave it on this as almost like, at the end of a movie when it's leaving opportunity for a sequel to go, the leadership sequel, the importance of leadership in order to bring all this to life.
Great things come in threes, and there's no use writing The Empire Strikes Back if you don't do Return of the Jedi. So I agree. And I think that the most consistent question that I get asked after I've done a talk is about leadership. How can we engage leaders so that they can see the opportunities that exist for corporate exploration? And I'm, my own view is that we spend too much time in corporations or in leadership discussions blaming people. The CFO doesn't get it. The CEO is too short-sighted. These maybe it's true on occasion. They're question that just in any population there is a normal distribution of willingness to explore and insights and all the rest of it. But it's much more useful if we think about why. Why are they taking the attitudes they are? And how can we move them and shape their actions closer to where we see the areas of opportunity and also learn from them? The book, Corporate Explorer, started with me sitting with my friend Vincent Roche from Analog Devices and telling him the idea. And he said, Andy, I don't want a book for me. I know what I need to do. I've read Michael and Charles's work. What I need is ideas. I need people to put ideas I can invest in on my table. And that is what I pursue. And so this is what CEOs need. And Vincent isn't alone. I know many other CEOs that are the same. He, incidentally, Analog Devices, and helped build some extraordinary new businesses based on the work he's done to license corporate explorers in Analog Devices. But that is the job of leaders. Now, the job of the corporate explorer is to earn the right to get those ideas on the table. And they've got to think about the influence network more consistently, coherently than we often do. I often draw the contrast between if you are seeking venture capital funding versus whether you're seeking it within a corporation. If you're seeking venture capital funding, you would know exactly what Aidan McCullen has backed in the last 5 years, what he likes in a business plan, what he's thinking about right now, what his shoe size is and where his kids go to school, right? You would be that interested in what it takes to get Aidan's support. But somehow Aidan, the SVP of product, we see him as a position holder who we just need to take a business case to. No, he's still a living human being with interests and biases and ambitions, things that he wants to achieve. And we've got to tap into that if we're really going to move leaders and help them to see the possibilities that exist in the ideas that we propose.
I believe that without leadership, you cannot do anything. I worked my 20+ years in open innovation. I know that without leadership, open innovation doesn't work. Because open innovation shakes up the fundamentals of innovation as a company in such a way that without strong leadership, it doesn't. And I think that with corporate exploration, it's pretty much the same. I recently spoke with a group of students from Europe and the US. And one of them asked me, okay, well, I'm working for the company and I will support it. Leadership doesn't work to listen to me. What should I do? And I kind of always I said, create it. Of course, we're unhappy with this response. They kind of perhaps expected something aligned, but it is honest response. So while I support Andy, fully support that we need kind of to create this to-do list for leaders, I would expect to compose, in a sense, a to-do list for corporate explorers. So it shouldn't necessarily be a book, but it's something what I see, it kind of a project, maybe crowdsourced project, that we outline all the steps that corporate explorers should take to, from conceiving of the idea to scaling up. And this at every point in milestone, the problems that they would get with their leadership and what to do about that.
The place where I really agree with you, Eugene, is that many of the answers lie in your peer group, right? And that's true in any profession or any activity, right? It's about other people who are facing similar problems and learning from them. That's why professional societies and so on exist and have such an important role. And part of the problem as a corporate explorer is you often don't have access directly to your peer group. Aidan, you talk about, hey, it turns out I was a corporate explorer. I didn't know that. And you probably didn't know that there were others like you. And so I would encourage people to join up to our LinkedIn group, which is the Corporate Explorer Club. And we have some Corporate Explorer learning pods starting to run as well, because what we need to do is create more of a sense of learning community here, because that's how you get through some of these challenges that are so consistent and common. And that may come some of the answers to how to engage leaders in the future.
It's that mix of the network. I think that's so important because there's such a psychological resilience that's needed when you're a corporate explorer. And that's really one of the things I wanted to bring to life. The red book, The Corporate Explorer, is really the theory behind it. And then the black book, The Corporate Explorer Fieldbook, is the theory and practice. But in here, you'll also find a support network. And as Andy said, there's a support network available. Andy, where can people find that network, or where can they reach out to you to find?
Find me on LinkedIn, Andrew J. Binns, and there's the Corporate Explorer Club. It is on LinkedIn, or find us at changelogic.com.
Brilliant. And I want to thank once again our mutual friend, Simon Hill, the CEO of Wazoku, who sponsored this series. And you can find Wazoku and their 700,000 plus corporate explorers, or open innovation network, if you want to call them that, what they call connected, collected intelligence. And you can find them at wazoku.com. For now, and with my great thanks for supporting this entire series across 2024, the authors of the Corporate Explorer Fieldbook, Eugene Ivanov and Andy Binns, thank you very much.
Thank you, Aidan. And thank you to Wazoku.